So, first time, how are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, good, fine. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad either. I had a good weekend, so looking forward to
Good.
the week.
It always
Um,
helps, doesn't it?
yeah, just put you in a good mood, so that's always good. Well,
Yeah.
I did ask before the camera went on, but well, you perhaps didn't have the best weekend with the results of the football match yesterday.
Yeah, it's been it's been a nice distraction actually, I think, for a lot of people. Um, in my lifetime, I've never seen England get that far in a major tournament, so it's pretty incredible. But yeah, very disappointing. Also, just like it was so, we could have so easily have won.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
um, but yeah, pretty brutal. It was crazy in London last night. It's like
Yeah, I can imagine.
driving
Um,
through the streets, and it was kind of carnage.
yeah, but my guess would be that even if they won, it would be the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Well, let's
exactly.
let's talk about some more fun things then, which is the album
Yeah.
that you've made. Now, before we do that, we have to go back to a time where it wasn't as much fun for you, which was the period in and around 2018, 2019. And you had been touring Jubilee Road for a while, and you kind of decided to immediately continue writing in America. When did you realize that that perhaps wasn't a good idea?
When I was in America, um, a couple of months in, I was struggling, and I was very, just I think you when one feels, you, you know, anxious or sad or tends to be that you're constantly trying to find a way and out of it, and um, you hope each morning the day might be better than the previous one, and but I think the thing that I realize is that, like, when you're in it, you don't. It's only time really
Mm.
and perspective which you really realize like how bad it was. Like at the time, you're just living in the present, and you're trying to make the best of how you feel. Um, and when I talk about it now, I almost trivialize it to some extent, and because I've got some distance from it.
Mm.
But at the time, it was very. It felt uh, like I had nowhere to go. You know.
What? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, Karen.
No, I was going to ask, because what in those moments kind of makes you throw yourself into work? Is it just as a distraction? Is it kind of a sense of pressure to perform and to achieve things?
I mean, sadly, I think it's try and be as transparent as possible. I think it's like all I really know
Mm.
what to do. Like, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm someone with like. I've never been particularly. I don't know. I tend to sort of like really, really be hard on myself if I don't feel like I'm being productive or achieving something, um, and it's very stifling that.
Mm.
Um, both one begins to realize that it's creatively stifling, uh, because the best stuff actually often comes when you stop trying. Um, you stop, banging your head against the wall. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. But
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's something obviously that has driven me to achieve a relative amount of success for someone like me, where I came from. You know, like I've put out a lot of music and I've toured the world, and you know, that drive in order to do something like that, it takes a lot of drive. Like that would be, you know, a phenomenal amount. You don't accidentally sort of do that. There has to be this burning desire to do it, of which I think commonly has a double-edged sword nature to it, which is that it gets you up in the morning, but also perhaps you know, doesn't sort of quietly put you back into bed at the end of the day.
Right.
So I think that's very common actually amongst a lot of artists, that are my friends, and I feel like that's this sort of non-specific burning drive, which is like, you know, almost sort of wild horse in a way. You know, like it's difficult to be tamed. Anyway, maybe I'm getting too self romanticizing here.
No, but I do think there is an element to that, because like you said, you don't end up in those places if you don't actually actively pursue it with a great sense of passion. So
yeah,
when you decided that you needed a break, and I believe you moved back home for a while, and there's a line in Noise: they sell me dreams, they sell me doubts. Did you completely stop social media and kind of
no, I mean, I didn't do a lot for quite a long time. I didn't do a lot of social, you know, I wasn't on it a lot. But I mean, I feel like I've slightly over-egged how much I stopped for. I didn't really stop. Okay. I mean, I stopped for about 2 weeks and then carried on working again. But you know, I got back to London and I was like, right, this has to be addressed, basically. That's what really, I got back to London. I was like, this is either gonna consume me, or I've got to try and face it, and so I tried to do that, and I think the music reflects that.
Yeah, well, when you say you had to face it, was that through songwriting then that you started to put the thoughts that you had onto paper, and then were those the thoughts that ended up being these songs?
I would say there was a dual facing. There was like, I faced it, you know, I sort of, you know, got therapy and like just tried to slow down a bit. And you know, when I went to LA, I was like, if I'm being honest, I was like, look, this is it's so exciting out there and everyone wants it, you know, and it was like, right, this is going to be my time. Like I'm going to do so much and work with everyone. And, you know, I remember just before I left, I was just about to work with Phineas. And I was so excited about that. And there was a guy in Nashville who was about to work with Michael Elizondo. And yeah, and then I left. It was like, but it's like, you know, I'm sure if I'd stayed, I would have been doing a lot more, but I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to go back. I can't, you know, and I'm going to make my record in London, and I'm going to stay here and be at home and stop traveling. And I've got to take a year from playing shows. And I told my manager that I'm not going to play shows for a year. But you know, it's as much like subtle shifts in the mind of just acknowledgement, you know. I would just felt like I was running from it and managing it with sort of, you know, self-destructive things, and you know, so yeah.
But I think focusing on mental health is obviously a continuous process. but was there a turning point, so to say, for you as you were writing these songs?
Well, where I started to get better.
Yeah, well, where you felt like you were perhaps ready to start kind of going into the kind of the business side again and opening yourself up, or at least where you felt more comfortable again.
Yeah, I mean, it was when I met my girlfriend.
Okay.
Things just started turning around. I owe a lot to her. And I just felt like I had a life outside of music again. And I didn't place all of my value in music, you know. I placed some value in myself again, you know. I think so much of it is about that, you know.
Well, it's
like
interesting that you. Sorry to interrupt, but it's interesting that you say that, because I've spoken to artists about this before, where their music and kind of how they are perceived becomes so much a part of your identity that it's difficult to separate yourself from that. So as you say, kind of doing some normal things and spending time with a girlfriend, that helped you kind of perhaps connect with yourself a little bit more.
I think that's very interesting. I've not thought of it like that. I think there's a strange thing as well about like the fact that like it's my name, like I am Tom. Like I'm not. It's not like you know. It's not a persona. And I think even more so, like my music has always been sort of like almost sort of like uncomfortably honest. And so like there's this sense that, and I agree with you. I think there is, and so, you know, so much of my life is intertwined in my career. And it is a strange, that's an interesting point, because I think it becomes your, I don't know. It's interesting. I think that separation is. I've always like prided myself on being really like good at that as well. Like I've always been someone that like, you know, I never, maybe right at the start of my career when I, you know, for a month, like I went to a few of the parties, and the, you know, the sort of high flying social scene, you know, like I very like briefly sort of like enjoyed and very quickly realized I didn't want to be a part of that. In, you know, because it was just like, that was just a prime example of career and personal life getting very, you know, wrapped up in this intertwined in this toxic way. And I've always observed that to be damaging to one's career, because I sort of always have been like, well, I've got my mates and I don't publicize like that part of my life. Like that's off. Like I go to the pub with my mates and we talk about, you know, things that aren't to do with, do you know what I mean?
Sure. Just
so you know, I don't, for that reason, I don't, you know, I have a lot of friends that work in the music business and who do similar jobs to me, but I've also got my mates, which are sort of, you know, I think different, but yeah, I think that's interesting. I don't. So what I was saying is, I've always prided myself on having that separation, but but maybe I wasn't so good at it, actually, in hindsight. You know, maybe it was still too much, and there's not enough separation still, and you know, you can't clock off at 7 o'clock and just, you know, take a walk and not think about, you know, songs. And I have a very obsessive characteristic, I think, in the sense that, and you know, this, I'm sure if you were to ask people that work with me, I mean, this is, I think, both a criticism and a compliment, is I'm very obsessive. And I think it actually again is another trait that has both benefited me and also held me back in a way, in that I work tirelessly on things until I feel that they're ready, almost to the point. And sometimes that works. For example, on that song, Another Love, which was one of the first songs I put out, you know, I worked tirelessly on that production. I must have recorded it, you know, 5 or 6 times, to the point that Dan Grech, who's you know, still a friend of mine, a wonderful producer, but me and him produced that song, and to the point that he was, I could see he was getting frustrated, that I remember at the time he was getting frustrated because I kept tweaking it, and he was right to, because it was probably done a month before, but it was just, but in a way, that obsession, I think, did mean that it was a really great record. And I've always, you know, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong, but interestingly, I've got songs which are much more where I've almost laughed because they're just so carefree, and they're the ones that people are drawn to, you know. And there's a certain spontaneity, a lack of polish that is very human and people are very drawn to, I think. So sometimes that obsession that overworking something can be very damaging, but also not just on the work, but on my own mind. You know, I remember countless times driving home from the studio or being in the studio, because I've got a studio at my house, you know, and just not being able to stop, just literally not being able to stop. And it almost, it's torturous. It's like I can feel the feeling now. It's like tortures my mind. And that's not good for one's sleep or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, with that in mind, then, how did you manage those obsessive sides of yourself in terms of Monster and the recording process? Because I don't know the timeline. I don't know if you recorded anything during lockdown and whether some things were by necessity that you had to record it in certain ways. But how did you manage that? Because it does feel a lot more carefree, this record.
Yeah. It was, well, we started recording it in January 2020, basically.
Okay.
A little bit in December, but mostly January 2020. And there's a new year. Everyone was very optimistic about the year ahead. And then, you know, we were interrupted, and then I did sort of half of it in the, I keep looking at it, you can't see, but there's a cabin at the end of my garden. I did a bit in there, and then we went back to the studio and did a few more months, and then back there for a few months. And so it was yeah, a long drawn out, you know, it took the best part of a year to record, only really 3 months to write, or 4 months to write. It's usually the other way around, but you know, I'd say yeah, it was pretty torturous at times to record this album. Okay. Still, I wouldn't say it was easy in any way, I think, but it was more enjoyable because I was very aware that we were searching for something and we were on an adventure. I was on an adventure, and the two guys working with were, you know, helping me with that, and perhaps on their own adventure. I feel like we were trying to find a new way of, you know, a new sound. That's what we're trying to do, and incredible amount of experimentation went into the record, and on every song, okay, that we probably tried 5 or 6 different variations of each song, both in tempo, key, feel, instrumentation, and that was kind of the process. So it was very long and drawn out, and quite often we would end up, you know, going with just taking stuff away, and it would just be like the rawest version of what we were doing, because so yeah. And you know, it's funny because some songs on the record, like Noise, for example, you know, that had like a whole chorus, which I just took out, just like, and it's just like, oh, it works so much better about the chorus. Like, did a whole version of that song, and then it's just like, oh, I just decided to do it, just a vocoder, and took 5 minutes to do that. And you know, and then some songs were, productions were just really laborious, and like Numb was really laborious. Like, I just took a long time because we were using pianos to create the atmospheres, and that was one of the ones I remember we really did in the lockdown, so remotely. So it was like sending files back and forth to one another. But yeah,
this experimentation process, maybe this is too broad, but what were you looking for in a sense?
Well, I think we're all, as artists, aren't we, just looking for a means to express something pure, and something that feels instinctually good. It's instinct mostly. I mean, it's very difficult to articulate what you're searching for, but I guess there's a feeling, for example, with Numb, you know, there was the song there, and which, you know, I brought in to this to the recording sessions, and it's like, okay, you know, I mean, look, I'm sat at the piano now. Look at what you gone done, baby, baby, now I know. And it's just, that's what I brought in, you know, just this. And just, how do we turn that into something that feels totally apathetic and devoid of all feeling? like it's such a ridiculous ambition, but like, you know, so I don't know, it's just difficult to find that, and the only way to do it is just to hear different things. And you know, I remember for like 4 days we were playing with just this riff, because it's got this riff in it, and it's like we tried it in so many different ways. I tried like this, tried it on different pianos, of like just, you know, playing it like, and just like so many different ways, and you know, and you end up finding a way of it sounds the best. And it's amazing doing it because you learn so much about music. And I have to, you know, say a big thank you as well to, I mean, not to, I've got to also acknowledge, you know, Johnny Coffer and Ara Benjamin, who I, you know, wrote that song with. And that's another thing, is the record is hugely collaborative. Like, I shouldn't be taking all the credit the whole time, because it was, there's lots of people on the credits, and you know, it was really so much learning went on, and so much collaboration, and completely unique way of making a record. I've never done that before. You know, just sort of like, I was actually just sort of like taking ideas that I had round to people who in a way were just sort of like contributing like little bits to it, and it was amazing. It was like writing songs with, it sounds like maybe derivative, but it wasn't. It was like so collaborative and artistic, and I've not ever made a record like that before. So in so many ways, I realize I'm going on and on, but
no, that's perfect.
In so many ways, like, it was just a totally new way for me of making an album, and that was only like carried even further by the fact that we were, you know, going through a international existential crisis, right, you know, which is like, it adds another layer of just absurdity to the whole thing. So you know, the record to me is like, it's quite weird, but I think great still. But like, you know, I think it's it's a uncomfortable, not weird's the wrong word, maybe like it's an uncomfortable record. You know, it's raw, and it's not meant to be pretty in any way. But nor should, you know, art shouldn't always be pretty. Art should be sometimes make you feel, you know, a variety of things.
No, I definitely agree. And like you mentioned, there's some songs that you've kind of abandoned the standard pop structure, and it's maybe just a couple of verses, or you really took some chances, both sonically and in terms of structure. But then what kind of all ties it together and makes it very you is obviously your voice. And now I particularly enjoyed your vocal performances, because you can really, like you say, it's raw, you can feel it. It's not like you haven't sung like this before. But what went into those vocal takes for you?
Well, that's that. I'm sure Laurie Blundell, who I produced the record with, will be very happy to hear that. I mean, we were obsessed with the vocal sound, and we put a hell of a lot of time into the sound of the vocals and the performance of the vocal, you know, the delivery of what I was doing. And I think the biggest thing was the microphone we discovered was this C800, Sony C800, which is like we first used one at one of the studios before the lockdown, and then became obsessed with the quality of it, because it's what like Dre used to use in the 90s, and he used to go into, I think, either a 1073 preamp and then a sort of Avalon. I might be wrong about that, but it was he used a Sony C800 to make a lot of his records, and it became like the microphone to use, and they stopped making them. And so they're incredibly expensive, but they are brilliant. And I think what's interesting to me is that I became fascinated by them because if you listen to pop music today, and this is the person that really changed the game was Drake, Ovo, his producer, is that he, you know, and I'm probably, you either know this or lots of people already who are watching this will know, but like he completely changed the game in the sense that like Drake's vocal just is so dominant in and that's become the way pop records are made. It's the vocal. If you listen to like a Justin Bieber record or most, you know, a loud record, or a lot of these big American pop songs, the vocal is just so dominant. If you compare it to a 90s record, you know, the vocal's like 10 dB quieter. And so people will often artificially add brightness to the vocal tracks that add loads of 10K, and they just boost it. And so you get this harshness, I find, in the vocal, which when you're listening on headphones, I find to be at times, not so much on the really big records, but on shitty pop records, to be quite unpleasant. But what's interesting about this microphone, this C800 microphone, is it has natural brightness, and it's incredibly bright. And so you literally record the vocal, and then after, there's no processing. You don't have to add any compression, any EQ, and it's remarkable. I mean, it's so really it's the most natural way to record a vocal and make it sound contemporary. And we became fascinated by that, and you know, I to the point that I then spunked fucking 15 grand on a bought one myself on a microphone. So yeah, they're really good. I recommend, but they're very rare. They're difficult to find. I had to get mine from Australia.
Okay. But well, at least you got a good mic for the foreseeing future, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, finally then, because one thing You write about all kinds of things. You write about gun tragedies in, I suppose, in the US, but it could be anywhere. You write about climate change. You write about capitalism and how that can be a form of pressure for so many. But then there is some hope in it. Don't be afraid of the dark. Some you lose, some you win. There are these nuggets of hope. And now in Problems, there is one line I haven't got it. Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted to. I think it's the opening line. Music's gonna solve my problems. So with all those kind of the world being on fire in the in the background, how has music helped you? How has this process of making monsters helped you?
Interestingly, up until this point, I think I've been asked this question, and I would say to some extent, and maybe this is the running theme of my answers today, is like it's sort of helped me and not helped me. I would say that making it did actually strangely, writing the songs and recording it did actually at moments, it was very hard to make, but I think that was for a number of circumstances. What's interesting though is since I've put it out, well, I put it out 3 days ago, but since I've put it out, since I've started putting music out, and I've told the world about how I was feeling, there's an enormous sense of brazenness, or a sort of fearlessness I've got from that, and I sort of feel quite like I never thought really it was my place to sing about this stuff, and I didn't really have. There's just always felt like there was just something blocking me from being able to write about it, and now I don't feel that, and I feel like I can write about anything. And I've also got to a point where I realise what I'm doing it for, and why I'm making music, and it's not just to churn out albums. Like I want to make things that have a depth to them and a curiosity to them, and that I like the fact that maybe some people won't like this. Like, if you get what I mean, like
Sure.
it's not trying to appeal to everyone, and I feel like I've served my artistry more with this record, in taking more risks, and I feel quite emboldened by that, and yeah, I just feel excited about the future and making more music and taking more risks and trying to just keep my appetite, for curiosity and adventure.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think art is also one part of art is to challenge not only yourself but also the listener. I think,
Yeah,
or the viewer, or whatever art form it may be. So hopefully,
yeah,
hopefully you'll keep on this trend. You have a good mic now, so
yeah.
you can record.
I bet I got to. I
Yeah.
got to pay it back.
Exactly. Well, Tom, thank you so much for sitting down and taking the time with me. And yeah, it's only been 3 days, but the things are looking at. I see your responses are looking good. So I wish you all the best, and hopefully you can perform the songs for people very soon.
Thanks, mate.
All
Nice
right.
chatting to you.
Thank you. Have a
Take
good
care.
one.
Thanks for the lovely interview. Have a nice day.